Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So Marc Maron has been doing his media tour, kind of doing the podcast circuit and talking about the fact that he's ending his show, WTF, as well as a new special that he just put out. The special is great, and he's been talking a lot about WTF, why he's ending it, as well as taking the opportunity to pretty much air his feelings out on the current comedy scene, people like Joe Rogan, and the environment that they have created, not just with their comedy, but with the podcast format, which Marc Maron was a pioneer of. And so I think he feels a sense that he's wrapped up in that world in some way, despite the fact that there's really not much connection there at all. He did JRE back in the day, as well as Joe doing WTF with Marc Maron, and that was a very contentious, famous discussion because Maron essentially had the same critique that he has of him now, but without the political aspect of it. But I think Maron has always been critical of Joe Rogan's influence and the fact that he came into the comedy scene and the entertainment scene, got commercials right away, got shows like Survivor right away. And so for a lot of people who were working in TV and entertainment, stand-up was kind of something that they just did on the side as a way to keep themselves exercised and to feel like they are participating in the community. So I think specifically in the LA scene, you get this sense that there are some people there that are more Hollywood or whatever and aren't dedicated to the craft of stand-up. So Marc Maron has had that critique about many people over the years, some correct, some not, but he's always pretty much felt that way about Joe Rogan. Not so much that he's not committed to the craft of comedy, but just that he's cut from a different cloth of person that is incompatible with the comedy world. So I think that's kind of always what he's thought of Joe, and now he is just trying to articulate how that personality type that he observed back then has turned into the political entity that we see in Joe Rogan and his audience now. And that is something that's separate from comedy and kind of not that compatible with comedy as a culture. So Marc Maron not only is critical of that because of his own personal feelings in knowing some of these people, as well as like you or I just being somebody who is principally opposed to it. But I also think he feels kind of wrapped up in it and, if not responsible for putting forth that format, he didn't exactly invent it, but he popularized it. So if he's not responsible for the culture that we have now, which I don't think he is, he at least was on the forefront of it. So this is an interview that he did with Sam Seder. These guys are old friends going back to Air America, which was an old lefty radio show. And they were just talking about Marc ending the show, what that means for the future of his career. And, Sam Seder gives him a little shit. They have an oddly contentious relationship, and it has this strange tone about it. Every time Marc and Sam get together and talk, Sam has a way with his friends where you can't quite tell if the contention that you're hearing between them is real or not. But, they clearly have a lot of love between each other. So we'll talk about all that later. I've yapped enough. Let's watch this quick clip. Then we'll get on to some other stuff. We won't spend too much time on this.
People have been sending me stuff. Like people, yeah. I know you were on Smartless. Somebody sent me a clip of that and my name came up. You didn't seem very happy about that, actually, in that moment. It came up. Yeah, you seemed upset.
I don't know if I was upset. I think like I think it's middle of. I think it's endearing upset. Like when your name comes up, I'm like, yeah. Well, Sam. So it's that tone.
Right. I mean, there was.
It's not fuck that guy.
But it was also there. No, it was not fuck that. It was more like, hey, I only got an hour.
Yeah,
no, I'm not gonna. Wait. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure that if you
we just spent 4 seconds. We just spent 4 seconds on that. That's enough. I only have an hour to talk. That's it.
But didn't we plug your show or something? I mean,
No. I mean, you moved on very quickly. I think it seemed uncomfortable actually, because, you know,
For them, they were like, why is he like this?
you know, Will, I used to be pretty good friends with, and Bateman would come on the show with Janine. And I think your tone, I mean, you know, you can't see anybody because it's just audio, but the tone, I think, was like, oh, okay, this is a sensitive subject, and people moved on. But that's not the point.
What's the point?
I don't know what the point was.
We don't have to break it all down, but you know and I know it was never just about the words, but ultimately these guys were marks for the right-wing propaganda machine and absorbed by their agenda and spearheaded, you know, what was in their eyes, I talk about in the special, this ability to say words they wanted to say, but they used anti-woke to dismantle all progressive policy for everybody.
Yeah.
So it's partially on them, and I can't separate it. You know, whether they were willing collaborators or just you know, grifting for themselves. I mean, it's like, fuck them, you know.
Marc Maron, congratulations on the spectacular. I mean, everybody knows about the cultural significance of your show, and really also on the entire format, which has spawned a lot of really actually not great stuff. But I'm not going to hold you responsible for that. You're not responsible for, you know.
I just made it seem like anybody could do it, and they did.
Yeah. And now they're ruining the country. So, you know, all right, well.
Yeah, I try to, you know, like, look, you know,
hey, it was helpful for you. And I think that's the important part. The important part, it was helpful for you, and it really reignited your career. So, you know.
Okay, yeah.
American democracy, small price to pay.
For my mental health and my success. That's exactly right. Yeah,
exactly. And so
I'm glad you framed it that way, because that, you know, just right on the money.
Yeah.
I mean, so there you go. You get a sense of their dynamic there. Sam is obviously just messing with him at the beginning there, talking about his appearance on a different podcast and how when Sam came up, Marc didn't seem that happy about it. However, I will say there does seem to be something genuine about the contention between these two. And it, you know, is obviously something that they play up for effect on the show. But anytime that Marc Maron has talked about Sam Seder off air, it usually has taken on that kind of tone of, you know, somebody that he likes and has history with, but doesn't necessarily get along with. So I think that they went in completely separate directions. You know, back in the days of Air America, they worked together on a show that was on the air, on the radio. Then they also had a separate show that they would do like some kind of early form of streaming. Then, you know, Air America eventually fell apart due to mismanagement. And Air America was like a left-wing radio project. Like they wanted to be the answer to Rush Limbaugh and right-wing talk radio. So they had a bunch of comedians like Sam Seder, Marc Maron, I believe Andy Kindler, and other people like that were all part of it. And it never really had that much success, except for the fact that they did build up a loyal listenership, which ended up being the foundation of at least Sam Seder's career as a broadcaster. I don't know if the same can be said for Marc Maron, because he was a comedian, but probably to an extent. And so this old format of radio, which even at the time that they were doing it seemed outdated, still gave them a foundation of actually reaching an audience of people, which has lasted them both to this day. And Marc Maron's going to go on to, you know, have a successful career still. He's acting and doing other things. It's a shame to me that he doesn't want to be more actively engaged in the political conversation in the way that Sam is. And I think that's the distinction between the directions they've gone in their careers, and also the distinction between the two of them. Because as I've noted about Marc Maron, he's a little bit more inwardly focused, focused on self-critique, self-characterization, that sort of thing. And then sometimes it ties into larger ideas about his feelings of the world. Sam Seder's more just focused on what's going on in the world, and you don't get a lot of inward reflection from him at all, at least not on the show. Maybe he keeps that separate, but there's a sense that that's just not the sort of thing that he's interested in. So, you know, Sam moved away from doing movies and comedy outright and wanted to move more in the direction of politics. Marc Maron wanted to do entertainment without the politics. And I think some balance of the two is needed. One point that Marc makes in this interview here is that left-wing politics is so niche. It's very hard to make it into entertainment on a mainstream level, which is interesting to think about because at least in the, recent era, the past couple decades, reasonably liberal messaging has been pretty mainstream. But it is true that anything further left than that it's not even really ostracized in the media. It's just kind of non-existent. You just sort of don't really get it at all, except maybe sometimes on the margins, people who work behind the scenes in certain forms of entertainment will write things into the script and that sort of thing that, go against capitalism or a sort of capitalist society. But ultimately, when it comes to left-wing entertainment that is specifically left-wing, you don't have a lot of projects that are mainstream in that vein. And maybe some years back, the same could be said on the right wing, but now that is not the case anymore. Projects like The Daily Wire are pretty well mainstream at this point. And you've got Fox News, you've got Newsmax, still on the air. And these are explicitly right-wing, in some cases, like ardently fascist programming, and you don't have any answer for that on the left in the mainstream. So I can understand why somebody would be burnt out with the idea of continuing on with that mission, and it's possible that Marc was never quite interested in that. But I wish he would. He's got a sharp perspective, a very refined perspective of somebody who's thought about politics a lot over the years. And so if WTF is ending, that's fine, but I hope whatever he's moving on to next, he continues to pop up in these political discussions, because as he's showing in this round of media that he's doing, he's useful in these discussions. He's saying things about this comedy culture and these people in the culture that nobody else can say. And nobody can make these points the way he's making them and as well as he's making them. So we need him, in some sense, we need this type of commentary. He's got a voice that definitely has become essential over the years. So hopefully we continue to hear from him, and hopefully he continues to call into the Majority Report, although it seems like maybe not so much with that. So the last thing I want to talk about real quick is there's some reporting from ProPublica about CECOT, about some of the people that have been released from CECOT and then sent to Venezuela in a deal that the U.S. made with Venezuela. So in exchange for releasing 200 inmates that were kept in El Salvador at the CECOT prison that Trump made a deal with the dictator of El Salvador, Bukele, to basically send migrants that the U.S. deems to be gang members or something to this horrible nightmare prison where they're supposedly never to return. So the U.S. was sending a bunch of people there as quickly as they could. Democrats and the media started to make some noise about it. It was one of the first and to this point only things that Democrats have successfully seized on and made a big deal about that Trump was doing. The guy Kilmar Garcia, who was deported. I believe he was living in Maryland and was deported to this place in El Salvador. He happened to also be from El Salvador, but there's a lot of people being sent to this prison that are not from there. And so essentially this deal went down with the U.S. to release a bunch of people who were supposedly arrested because they are a part of this gang, Tren de Aragua, or some other gang. And Tren de Aragua is essentially the catch-all term that the Trump administration has been using for anybody, especially of a certain type of descent, that they want to get out of the country. They stamp them with that. They can find any tattoo on a person that is like a crown or other symbols that they've deemed to be associated with Tren de Aragua. They will send that person to camp and deport them, and possibly send them to CECOT, possibly send them to some other country. So you're seeing some reporting now from ProPublica about what kind of things these people have been going through. You're hearing over and over again that people are told when they get there that they're never gonna leave, that they're gonna die there, horrible things like that, being kept on their knees with their heads down for many, many hours. This is a torture prison, and this is being run by people who don't believe they'll ever be held accountable for what they do there. There was a gay man who was sent there who was sexually abused there, according to him. And some of these people that were released in this deal that the U.S. made are essentially coming out now and saying that they had no criminal records. And the reporting from ProPublica is confirming that the government knew that they didn't have any criminal records. So these are just people that were picked up off the street. Some of them came here legally, were in the immigration process, in the process of becoming legal citizens, and had been following that process, and in the process of their court hearings were arrested and deported. So these people that we're seeing getting arrested at their court hearings are ending up at some of these prisons. Their families don't know where they are. And in the cases of these 200 people that got released back to Venezuela, thankfully they've been at least reunited with their family. Some of them had deportation orders to go back to Venezuela, and instead were sent to this prison in El Salvador. So what that means is that these people are being herded as chattel. And even this deal that Trump made with Venezuela shows that they're just being leveraged, and calling them members of a certain gang is just a way to excuse sending them all to a prison like this whole cloth, whether it's one in Florida or one in El Salvador or whatever else they're cooking up. You send them there as fast as they can, ideally to a place where they have no rights, some kind of black site. And then you can use them as chattel and use them as leverage in negotiations. You can use them for labor, and you can use the fact that they want to find some kind of freedom as leverage to get them to do certain things. So this is the sort of evolution of chattel slavery, and that's the kind of thinking that Donald Trump comes from as sort of like an old school racist, raised by old school racists. All of them have it in their mind that slavery needs to be brought back in some sense. And so they look at this population of people that are undocumented in some sense, or know somebody who's undocumented, or have some kind of flaw in their paperwork or something, and they look at this as a population that can be enslaved or at least subjugated to the extent that a society will allow. So that's the vision of Donald Trump. It has been from the beginning. And back to the idea of mainstream entertainment, the best thing that can be done in just the area of entertainment, because it's not enough to do this, the best thing that can be done is to stamp Donald Trump with these images and to brand him with this. And that's what South Park has been doing well so far in their new season, is they're stamping Donald Trump with the worst things, the things he's the most vulnerable about. They're stamping him with that in a way that is hitting and is landing. So, you know, in terms of mainstream entertainment, that's the way to fight back against this type of monstrosity, is not only make these images and stories public, but to stamp them on Trump and anybody associated with him and with this as strongly and as memorably as possible.